Some warnings carry the weight of absolute certainty, the kind delivered with such conviction that ignoring them feels like choosing deliberate destruction. For King Theon, who'd spent 3 centuries making calculated decisions and weighing every risk against potential reward, that warning came from a woman standing in his private quarters, with magic crackling around her fingertips and desperate fear in her eyes. Kayla, the cursebreaker he'd hired to solve a magical crisis threatening his kingdom, had just explained the terrible cost of what was developing between them. That the attraction they'd been fighting for weeks wasn't just inconvenient or inappropriate, it was catastrophically dangerous. That if they gave in to what they both felt, if they crossed that line from professional partnership to something more intimate, the curse she carried would transfer to him, would strip away his immortality, his shifting abilities, every magical protection he relied on.
Would reduce him from the Beast King who'd ruled for 3 centuries to an ordinary mortal who could die from a simple blade. "If you kiss me, you'll lose everything." She'd said it with tears streaming down her face, magic flaring in response to emotional distress. Your power, your immortality, your ability to protect this kingdom, everything that makes you who you are will burn away the moment our lips touch. So please, please don't. I'm not worth that cost. Theon had looked at this woman who'd spent weeks working beside him, who made him laugh and challenged his assumptions, and somehow made 300 years of loneliness feel like it was finally ending. Then he'd crossed the space between them, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her anyway. The magic that erupted was visible across the entire kingdom, a pillar of light that marked the moment an immortal king chose love over everything else. Kayla had been born with a curse she hadn't asked for and couldn't control.
Her mother had been a hedge witch who'd gotten involved with the wrong people, made deals with entities that shouldn't be dealt with, and paid the price when Kayla was born. The curse was elegant in its cruelty. Anyone Kayla formed genuine romantic attachment to would have their magical abilities stripped away. Not gradually, instantly, the moment physical intimacy crossed from friendly to romantic. A kiss, an embrace that meant more than comfort, any touch that acknowledged desire, all of it would trigger the transfer. The other person's magic would burn into Kayla, strengthening the curse and leaving them ordinary. Her mother had died trying to break it when Kayla was 5. The entities that created the curse weren't interested in mercy or negotiation. They'd designed it specifically to isolate, to ensure that anyone born with it would spend their life alone or destroy everyone they cared about. There was no breaking it, only managing it. Kayla had learned young to keep distance.
Never got close to anyone, never let friendship develop into anything more. Spent her childhood and adolescence watching other people fall in love while knowing that path was permanently closed to her. By 20, she channeled her frustration into studying curses. If she couldn't break her own, maybe she could help others with theirs. She became skilled at curse breaking, at understanding magical structures and finding weaknesses. By 25, she had a reputation as someone who could handle cases other practitioners failed at. She worked alone, traveled constantly, never stayed anywhere long enough to form attachments. It was lonely, but safe. Safe for her and safe for everyone else. Then came the commission that changed everything. King Theon's kingdom was being affected by an ancient curse that was causing magical infrastructure to fail, protective wards weakening, communication spells breaking down, the slow unraveling of systems that had functioned for centuries. He needed someone who understood complex curse work and wasn't afraid to tackle something that had stumped his court mages for months. Kayla's name came up repeatedly as the best option. She tried to refuse. Working in close proximity to royalty, especially an immortal king with significant personal power, felt dangerous. But the pay was substantial, and the challenge was interesting. She convinced herself she could maintain professional distance. Just another job. She'd done hundreds. This would be no different. She arrived at the palace on a cold autumn morning and met King Theon in his private study. He was tall, imposing in ways that went beyond physical presence.
3 centuries of ruling showed in how he carried himself. But he was also tired, she noticed. The kind of exhaustion that came from too many years carrying too much weight alone. The curse affecting the kingdom is complex, he'd explained, spreading maps and documents across his desk.
Our mages believe it's tied to the original founding magic, something embedded in the infrastructure itself that's now degrading. We need to understand what it is and how to counter it before critical systems fail completely. Kayla had reviewed the documentation. The curse was indeed complex, layered and sophisticated in ways that suggested ancient and powerful magic. This will take time, weeks, possibly months, and I'll need access to everything: historical records, magical archives, the physical locations where the curse is manifesting. Also, I work alone. No assistants, no court mages looking over my shoulder, just me. Those are my terms. Theon had agreed without hesitation. Whatever you need. This is critical enough that I'm giving you complete authority and access. Report directly to me, bypass normal protocols if necessary. Just fix it. They'd shaken hands, a professional agreement between specialist and client, and Kayla had felt the first warning tingle of danger.
His touch was warm, solid, grounding in ways that made her want to hold on longer than appropriate. She'd pulled away quickly, reminding herself this was temporary, just a job. She'd leave when it was done. The first 2 weeks were purely professional. Kayla researched obsessively, spending 18-hour days in archives and examining magical infrastructure. Theon checked in daily, always respectful of her process, but clearly invested in the results. Their interactions were brief and focused. She'd report findings, he'd provide additional resources or access. Standard client relationship. Then came the night she found a critical clue buried in historical records. It was past midnight, she'd been working for 20 straight hours, and she needed to share the discovery immediately. She'd gone to his private quarters without thinking about the late hour or the informality of the visit. Theon had opened the door in casual clothing, clearly about to sleep, looking more human than royal.
He'd invited her in without hesitation. She'd explained her findings with growing excitement, spreading documents across his sitting room table, gesturing enthusiastically as the implications became clear. The curse was tied to the kingdom's founding, but not in the way anyone thought. It was actually a protection that had degraded over centuries into something harmful, like medicine that turns to poison with age. Fixing it required understanding the original intent and carefully reconstructing what had been lost. Theon had listened with complete attention, asking intelligent questions, clearly following her logic. When she finished explaining, he'd smiled with genuine appreciation. "This is brilliant work. You've made more progress in 2 weeks than our mages managed in months. I knew hiring you was right, but you've exceeded every expectation." The praise had made her feel warm in ways that were definitely not professional. She tried to redirect to logistics, to next steps and required resources. But he'd insisted, she said, have tea, take a break from the obsessive research pace. They talked for 3 hours, about the curse initially, but the conversation had drifted to other things. His 3 centuries of ruling and the loneliness that came with outliving everyone, her nomadic life, and the isolation of never forming real connections. They'd found unexpected common ground. Both understood what it meant to be fundamentally alone, despite being surrounded by people. The conversation had felt easy, natural, like talking to someone who actually understood. Kayla had left his quarters at dawn, returned to her work, and tried to ignore the warning bells screaming in her mind. The next month was a study in professional boundaries slowly eroding. They still maintained the work relationship. Kayla researched and developed solutions. Theon provided support and resources. But the check-ins got longer, the conversations deeper. The comfortable silences more frequent. They started having dinner together while discussing findings, then kept talking long after the work topics were exhausted. Kayla told him about growing up cursed, about watching her mother die trying to fix what couldn't be fixed, about choosing to help others with their curses since she couldn't break her own. Theon told her about the weight of immortal rule, about making decisions that affected thousands while having nobody to truly share the burden with, about the wolf form he shifted into, and how the beast instincts sometimes felt more honest than human politics. They made each other laugh, found they enjoyed debating magical theory and arguing about historical interpretation, discovered shared interests beyond the curse work. Kayla kept reminding herself this was temporary. She'd fix the kingdom's curse and leave before things got more complicated. But she was already lying to herself. Things were already complicated. She was falling for him, and worse, he seemed to be falling for her. The moment she couldn't deny it anymore came during a field investigation 6 weeks into the project. They'd gone to examine a failing ward structure on the kingdom's northern border. The location was remote enough that they'd traveled without guards or attendants, just the two of them. The ward was degrading in real time, magical energy visible as it fractured and dissipated. Kyla was taking readings when the structure failed catastrophically. The energy backlash should have killed her. Would have, except Theon had shifted to wolf form in seconds and thrown himself between her and the blast, taken the impact that was meant for her. She'd found herself on the ground with a massive silver wolf standing over her protectively, badly hurt but alive because he'd absorbed damage meant for her. The wolf had shifted back to human form. Theon, bleeding from the magical burns,
had immediately checked if she was okay before acknowledging his own injuries. She treated his wounds with shaking hands, simultaneously furious that he'd risked himself and terrified by how much his safety mattered to her. Why would you do that? Her voice had been rough with emotion. You could have died. So could you. He'd said it like the choice was obvious, like protecting her was more important than his own survival. Kayla, I've spent 3 centuries making calculated decisions. That wasn't calculated. That was instinct. You were in danger, and I reacted. That's all. That's not all. She'd pressed her hand over the worst of his wounds, pouring healing magic into them, despite her exhaustion. That was you choosing to risk your life for mine. That's not nothing. No, it's not nothing. He'd caught her hand, held it against his chest, where she could feel his heartbeat. It's everything. That's the problem. The honesty in his voice had made her breath catch, because she felt it too.
This had gone beyond professional partnership, beyond friendship, into territory that was absolutely forbidden for her. The conversation they'd been avoiding came that night back at the palace. Theon had recovered fully thanks to his regenerative abilities. Kayla had not recovered from the realization that she was in love with someone she could never have. He'd found her in the library where she'd been working, trying to lose herself in research to avoid confronting feelings. We need to talk about what's happening between us. His voice had been gentle but firm. We've been dancing around it for weeks. It's time to be direct. There's nothing happening. She'd kept her eyes on her books. You're my client. I'm fixing your kingdom's curse. That's all. Kayla, please don't insult either of our intelligence. We both know this has become more than professional. I see how you look at me. I know you feel what I'm feeling. Why won't you acknowledge it? Because acknowledging it makes it real. And real means dangerous. She'd finally looked at him. Theon, you don't understand. I can't have this. Can't have what? Connection? Relationship? Someone who actually sees you? All of it. She'd felt tears threaten. I'm cursed. Not the curse you hired me to fix, a personal curse I was born with. Anyone I form romantic attachment to loses their magic the moment we physically acknowledge the relationship. A kiss? An intimate touch? Anything that crosses from friendly to romantic triggers it instantly. They become ordinary while I absorb their power. So yes, I feel what you're feeling, but I can't act on it because doing so would destroy you. The silence that had followed was absolute. Then Theon had asked the obvious question. Can it be broken? I've spent 20 years trying. My mother died trying. It can't be broken, only managed, which is why I don't do relationships, why I work alone and move constantly, why this thing between us has to stop before it goes further. Because I will not be responsible for stripping away your immortality and power. I will not turn the Beast King into an ordinary man who can be killed. You deserve better than that fate. Even if you're willing to risk it, I'm not. He'd cross to her slowly. What if I am willing to risk it? Absolutely not. You're not thinking clearly. Your kingdom needs you immortal and powerful. Thousands of people depend on your protection. You can't throw that away for feelings that developed over a few weeks. This isn't just a few weeks. He'd stopped directly in front of her. I've spent 3 centuries alone because everyone I cared about eventually died. I convinced myself I was fine with solitude. Then you appeared, and I remembered what it felt like to actually connect with someone, to laugh and debate and look forward to conversations, to feel seen instead of just obeyed. You make me want to risk everything for the chance at something real. That's not rational. It's completely irrational.
Which is exactly why it matters. He'd reached out, stopped himself before touching her. I understand the consequences. I'm not minimizing them. The Kayla, I've lived 300 years, seen empires rise and fall, watched countless people live and die. You know what I've learned? That connection matters more than power. That loving someone is worth any cost. That I'd rather have 1 mortal lifetime with someone who sees me than 3 more centuries of immortal isolation. She'd felt her resolve cracking. You say that now, but when you're actually mortal, when you're vulnerable and can be hurt, when you've lost everything that makes you who you are, you'll regret it. You'll resent me. And I can't survive being the person who destroyed you. Then we don't do it. He'd said it with finality. We maintain distance, you finish fixing the kingdom's curse, and leave. We never acknowledge what we feel. We both go back to being alone, because that's safer than the alternative.
Is that what you want? No, the word had torn out of her. But it's what has to happen. The next 2 weeks were agony. They maintained professional distance, kept conversations focused purely on work. Kayla made significant progress on the kingdom's curse, developed a comprehensive solution that would repair the degraded magic and prevent future failures. She was maybe 3 weeks from completing the work. 3 weeks, and she could leave, could go back to her nomadic existence and try to forget what it felt like to be falling in love with someone she couldn't have. The breaking point came during a magical emergency. One of the major wards failed completely, creating a breach that allowed dangerous creatures to cross into populated areas. Theon had gone to handle it personally, as he always did with critical threats. Kayla had stayed at the palace, continuing her work. He'd returned 12 hours later, exhausted and injured but victorious. The breach was sealed.
The creatures were handled, the civilians were safe, but he'd taken significant damage doing it alone. She'd found him in his quarters, badly hurt, trying to treat his own wounds with obvious pain. Couldn't wait for healers, he'd explained, when she demanded to know why he was being stupid. People needed immediate help, had to shift and fight, got the job done. At what cost? She'd pushed him into a chair and started examining injuries. You're hurt badly enough that even with your healing, this is going to take days to recover from. You shouldn't have done this alone. Didn't have a choice. His voice was tired. This is what kings do. Handle threats regardless of personal cost. Well, it's stupid. She'd been angry because she was terrified. Seeing him hurt made her chest tight and her hands shake. You have advisors and soldiers and resources. You don't have to personally throw yourself at every danger. I do when the danger requires my specific abilities.
He'd caught her hand when she was treating a particularly bad wound. Kayla, I've been doing this for 3 centuries. I know the risks. She'd looked at their joined hands, at the comfortable way he held hers, like it was natural and right, at the way she didn't want to pull away, despite knowing she should. You're going to get yourself killed because you can't admit you need help, because you've spent 300 years alone thinking you have to handle everything yourself. You're the one who reminded me I don't have to be alone. Then accept help. Let people in. Stop carrying everything solo. I'm trying to. He'd pulled her closer gently. You're the first person in centuries who makes me want to share the weight, who makes me think maybe I don't have to do everything alone. But you keep pushing away because you're terrified of your curse. So we're both trapped. You by magic that isolates you, me by immortality that makes real connection temporary at best. What a pair we make.
She'd felt tears start. I hate this. I hate that I found someone who actually sees me and I can't have them. I hate that you're willing to risk everything and I'm too afraid to let you. I hate that the smart choice feels like the worst one. Then make the not smart choice. His voice had been rough with emotion. Stop being safe. Take the risk. Let me decide what I'm willing to lose. I already told you the cost. You lose everything that makes you who you are. I become the person who destroyed the Beast King. How do we survive that? We figure it out together. He'd cupped her face carefully. I've thought about this constantly for weeks, mapped out every consequence. I know what I'm risking, and I'm telling you clearly, with full understanding of what it costs, that I'd rather have you and mortality than immortality and emptiness. Please let me make that choice. She tried one more time to make him see reason. Your kingdom needs you immortal and powerful. Thousands of people depend on you being the Beast King. If you become mortal, if you lose your abilities, how do you protect them? I've spent 3 centuries building systems and training people and establishing infrastructure. The kingdom doesn't depend solely on me anymore. Yes, I'm important, but I'm not irreplaceable. I've made sure of that specifically because immortality doesn't mean invulnerability. I could die tomorrow from a dozen different things. The kingdom would survive. What if you regret it? What if losing your power is worse than you imagine and you blame me? Then I blame you and we deal with it like adults. But Kayla, I've lived 300 years. I've had power and immortality and every advantage you can imagine. You know what I haven't had? Someone who makes me laugh, someone who challenges me, someone who sees Theon instead of the crown or the beast. You've given me more in 2 months than 3 centuries provided. That's worth any cost. She'd looked at him. This immortal king willing to become mortal for her and felt her resolve completely shatter. I'm terrified. Good, so am I. Being terrified means it matters. If you kiss me, you'll lose everything. I know. He'd leaned closer. Everything except you. That's the part that actually counts. She'd given him one final chance to reconsider. Last warning. Once we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be mortal, vulnerable. Everything changes. I understand. His voice had been steady, certain. I'm choosing this with full knowledge of consequences. I'm choosing you. Then his mouth had been on hers, gentle and certain, and the world had exploded with magic. The curse activated instantly. Power poured from Theon into Kayla in a rush that was overwhelming and terrible. She felt his immortality burn away, felt his shape-shifting abilities transfer, felt centuries of accumulated magical strength flood into her. The sensation was agony and ecstasy, like every nerve was on fire. But worse than the physical pain was feeling what she was taking from him. His wolf form, his rapid healing, his resistance to age and damage. Everything that had kept him alive for 300 years was being stripped away and absorbed. She tried to pull back, to stop the transfer, but the curse had to complete once triggered, had to take everything before releasing them. When it finally ended, they collapsed together on the floor. Kayla was glowing with absorbed power, her body struggling to contain magic it wasn't designed for. Theon was diminished in ways she could see. Not physically smaller, but the presence that had filled rooms was reduced. The weight of immortal power was gone. He looked up at her with completely human eyes and smiled. Worth it. Absolutely worth it. The aftermath was chaos. The pillar of light from the power transfer had been visible across the entire kingdom. Palace officials and court mages rushed to the king's quarters.
Found Theon mortal and Kayla crackling with stolen power. Lady Seraphina had demanded explanations. The court had erupted in protests and panic. How could the king do this? How would the kingdom survive?
What about the threats that required his specific abilities? Theon had shut down the panic with authority that proved losing magic didn't mean losing command. I made a choice with full understanding of consequences. The systems I've built over 3 centuries don't depend on my personal power alone. We'll adapt. The kingdom will continue. And anyone who questions this decision can bring their concerns directly to me. But understand that I'm more committed to protecting this kingdom now than I've ever been. Because now I'm mortal like the people I serve. That means something. The curse that had been plaguing the kingdom's infrastructure still needed to be fixed. Kayla, now carrying more power than she'd ever imagined, worked with renewed urgency. She had maybe days before the absorbed magic destabilized completely, had to channel it productively before it destroyed her. She spent 72 hours straight rebuilding the kingdom's magical infrastructure, used the stolen immortal power to repair what centuries had degraded, reconstructed protective wards, reinforced communication spells, poured everything she'd taken from Theon into fixing what was broken. Theon stayed with her the entire time, mortal now, vulnerable in ways he hadn't been for 3 centuries, but absolutely steady in his support. He brought her food she didn't eat, reminded her to rest when she pushed too hard, held her when the power surges got overwhelming. By the end of the 3rd day, Kayla had successfully channeled the absorbed magic into the kingdom's infrastructure. The curse was broken, the systems were stable, and she was left with significantly less power than she'd temporarily carried, but still more than she'd had before. The curse that had plagued her since birth was altered, but not gone. She could feel it still there, waiting. But something had changed. Theon, being willing to sacrifice everything, had shifted the magical structure in ways she didn't fully understand yet. 4 days after the kiss that changed everything, Kayla and Theon finally had privacy to talk. He was adjusting to mortality, healing slower, tiring more easily, feeling vulnerability he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries. She was adjusting to carrying remnants of his power and the guilt of having taken it. "Do you regret it?" she had to ask. "Being mortal? Losing everything?" "No," he'd taken her hand. "I regret that you're feeling guilty about something I chose freely, but I don't regret the choice itself. Every morning I wake up mortal with you is better than any of my immortal centuries alone. I destroyed who you were. You transformed who I was. There's a difference." He'd pulled her close. "I was the Beast King, isolated and immortal and slowly forgetting what it felt like to be human. Now I'm Theon, mortal and vulnerable and actually alive for the first time in centuries. You didn't destroy me. You saved me." She'd pressed her face against his chest. "I'm still terrified of what comes next, of you eventually resenting what this cost, of not being worth the sacrifice. Then be terrified with me, because I'm scared too. Mortality is strange after 3 centuries. But Kayla, I'd rather face uncertainty with you than face eternal certainty alone. That's what love means, choosing the person over the comfort." The first year of Theon's mortality was adjustment. He had to relearn his body's limits, couldn't heal instantly from injuries, couldn't shift to wolf form anymore, couldn't outlast everyone through sheer immortal endurance. It was humbling and frustrating and occasionally terrifying, but he also discovered benefits. Food tasted better, sleep was more restorative. Emotions ran deeper when you knew time was limited. Every moment felt more precious because mortality made it finite. He governed differently, more conscious of the human cost of decisions because he was human now, more willing to delegate and trust others because he couldn't do everything personally anymore, more focused on building systems that would outlast him because his time was limited. The kingdom adjusted to having a mortal king. Some nobles saw it as weakness and attempted power plays. Theon shut them down with political acumen that proved power came from more than magic. Some citizens worried about vulnerability.
Theon demonstrated that leadership was about wisdom and will, not just immortal strength. Gradually, the kingdom came to respect their mortal king as much or more than they'd feared the immortal one. Kayla stayed, despite her intention to leave once the work was done, partly because the absorbed power needed monitoring.
Mostly because leaving Theon was impossible now. She continued her curse-breaking work, but based herself in the capital, became part of the court as the king's partner and advisor. They married quietly 6 months after the kiss that changed everything. No grand ceremony, just simple vows exchanged in private. Theon promised to live every day of his mortal life loving her. Kayla promised to never stop feeling grateful he'd chosen her, despite the cost. They built a life that was complicated and beautiful, argued about policy and magical theory, supported each other through challenges, learned what it meant to be partners who'd made impossible sacrifices for each other. The curse Kayla carried was permanently altered by what Theon had done. It was still there, still dangerous, but it no longer activated with the same inevitability. His willing sacrifice had changed the magical structure in ways that gave her more control. She'd never be free of it completely.
But she was no longer completely controlled by it either. That was its own kind of freedom. 5 years after the kiss, during a quiet evening in their private quarters, Kayla asked him the question that had haunted her. If you could go back, knowing everything, would you still kiss me? Would you still choose mortality? Theon didn't hesitate. Every single time, without question, even knowing the cost, especially knowing the cost. He pulled her close. The cost is what makes the choice meaningful. If there was no sacrifice, it would be easy. But I gave up immortality and power and everything I'd been for 3 centuries. That's how you know it mattered. That's how you know I chose you over literally everything else. She felt tears threaten. I'm still not sure I'm worth that. Good thing it's not your decision then. He kissed her forehead. I decided you were worth it. I lived 300 years and learned exactly what I valued. When I finally found someone who made life feel worth living, choosing her over eternal loneliness was the easiest decision I ever made. She looked at this mortal man who'd been an immortal king, who'd sacrificed everything for her, who seemed happier now than any of the stories said he'd been in his long life. I love you for choosing me, for being willing to lose everything, for making mortality look like the better option. I love you for warning me, his voice was gentle, for giving me every chance to reconsider, for being terrified on my behalf, and for being brave enough to let me make my own choice, even though it scared you. That's real love, not protecting each other from hard decisions, but supporting each other through them. They sat together in the comfortable quiet of 5 years shared, the former immortal and the woman who'd stolen his power, living proof that some things are worth any cost, that loving someone means choosing them even when logic says you shouldn't. That mortality with connection beats immortality with isolation, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is risk everything for the person who makes life worth living. If this story reminded you that real love means choosing someone despite the cost, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Drop a comment with the word moon if you believe some people are worth any sacrifice. Share this video with someone who needs to know that the best things in life require the most courage. Sometimes losing everything material means gaining everything that actually matters. Thanks for watching. And remember, we define ourselves not by what we're willing to keep, but by what we're willing to give up for what truly matters.